There is a century-long war going on in the small continent of Valandis, and the peace pact between the intervenients is the trigger for Chained Echoes' story. We aren't given any reason for this war, only that the participating nations are fighting for dominance over what one would assume would be the territory and resources. It's hard to make a judgment because, not knowing the reasons, we can make a thorough analysis of what the war means for each of the participants. Likewise, we are presented with a peace treaty between them, but aren't given any details about the negotiations, and so again, it's hard to weigh motivations across the different factions. Sure, there's the submission of the defeated, but what were the demands from each one that were made and not met, so that the war broke and even a peace treaty was broken? We have to make a lot of assumptions based on small pieces of information that the game hands us. Tarion is pictured as the homogeneous local power that seeks to unite the territory under its banners. It invades neighboring countries and resumes the war effort after the peace treaty is broken, which has a toll on its citizens that carry the cost of the war burden, which, interestingly, is not enough to sprout a local revolution. The Tarion narrative is that there is a bigger evil outside of the continent coming to invade them, and the neighboring nations must unite against it. This kind of narrative, which strengthens nationalist collective thought, is used fairly often and approached in other cases for other intervenients. As in real life, othering is a common tool for maintaining stability in a society whose population is going through crisis. In this case, more resources are being allocated to maintain the war, instead of being used for the population, but propaganda passed along is of the "we must sacrifice ourselves for the greater good, as there is a bigger evil out there" kind. What is interesting is that one of the countries is presented as the threat and actual aggressor, while the others try to defend themselves. But the other countries are not painted in a very positive light either. In fact, out of all the information we are given, Escania is shown to be what seems like the most unstable state at the beginning of the game, where possible heirs to the throne are killing each other. There is the usual romanticizing of the virtue of would-be saviors embodied by some of the main cast. The most important characters have their agency removed from them by means of a kind of prophecy. Their actions are eventually, or maybe they always were, guided by their destiny. Such determinism in the actions of a selected few is worrying when these selected few decide by themselves to risk humanity's permanent end by ending the cycle of death and rebirth in the planet at the hands of a group of demigods. It is valuable, on the other hand, that the risk they are taking is not exactly compensated, since the ending of the current cycle is not happening during their lifetimes, or at least it doesn't seem so. Still, their motivations are deterministically and religiously defined. There are multiple instances where the capricious nature of the group is made more evident. We are supposed to feel bad for Rob, member of our party, because he was supposedly harassed by other court servants, even though he constantly harasses and at one point just murders people who are perceived as underclassed, and finds redemption by following someone essentially because of their high status. Lan harassing soldiers of her own country and threatening them with unemployment, for them basically doing their work, and trying to prove she was who she said she was when she tries to cross a frontier checkpoint. Like in many works of fantasy, there are several races inhabiting the world, and there's quite a bit of xenophobia and racism portrayed. There is one particular case that is worth mentioning, which is the case of the goblins. These are portrayed as having the same cognitive level as humans, but are perceived as savages. There is an hilarious ending to a goblin-related quest, where the party ends up killing a lot of them, which is just brushed off with, well, let's just move on, to cover their complete dissociation from what their actions' consequences actually were. Probably one of the most interesting characters is Killian. Killian adopts a very uncommon position from a more progressive point of view. He is motivated to, in his own words, abolish class hierarchy in the world of Chained Echoes, not because of the fact that he is a moralist and believes in some sort of good essentialist nature of people, but actually because he has seen the worst things that they can do, so he can interpret it in a way that, If you get rid of what he considers are the structures of power that allow and even enable people to commit atrocities, we would just have a better world to live in for everyone. Regardless of the possible naivete of such an argument, it is refreshing to see someone who, precisely because he understands and knows what people are capable of, aims to take away the mechanisms that possibly enable such a behavior. Usually, two other positions are taken. We have the fatalist perspective, in which, after understanding the evil humans can perpetrate on each other, the character aims for total destruction, seeing no salvation at all for everyone. Or we have the moralist who believes people are good, and in general terms, should be left to their own devices freely. Unfortunately, Killian's path has some high and lows. Although initially interested in sacrificing some things for what he considers the greater good, he ends up getting involved in very massively destructive activities that appear to undermine his motivations. And so, we aren't shown a very interesting development of this unusual set of premises. In fact, one could say it actually contributes counterproductively to the premise. Killian does have his redemption in the end, but it doesn't feel very tied to his initial motivations either.